all of your back stock, and now you might have to actually start buying your own booze. Ooh. Guilty. So I know what we're dealing with obviously is serious, but I want to bring some levity because part of this conference, this is what this is about. It's about getting real where we are, but it's also about how do we move forward? What can we positively influence moving forward together as a community? So I had a chance to talk with some of you and ask, what are some of the biggest challenges you're dealing with from a leadership standpoint? This session's about leading through change, right? Here's a couple of the things that I heard. We're used to challenge, but these are truly uncharted times. We don't have a playbook for this. Unless you have the playbook from the 1912 Spanish flu, that's probably the only thing you need, right? The biggest leadership challenge is the amount of uncertainty. How do we make decisions? How do we plan? How do we plan for our business and our future when we don't know? We don't know when this is going to end and what the impact is going to be. Following safety and standard protocols, new way of doing things. The challenge, I was just talking to someone, right? Challenging to keep positive, dealing with layoffs and furloughs. That's emotional. It's going to drain you. It's going to impact you. It's people's livelihoods and jobs. How do you encourage and stay connected with furloughed staff? What do you tell them when you don't know what to tell them? How do you lead a team? How do you lead the team you have left? Some people have this survival guilt, right? They're a little left and they're still a smaller, more lean and mean team. How do you manage those team members working remotely? We're seeing personal lives and professional lives are, blurred like never before, which provides some opportunity too. We'll touch on that. Staffing issues. Are we going to be able to get staff back? Some of them are making more in unemployment than they would make working. And staying current on the ever-changing government regulations that are making you irregular. All these is a lot of the things that I heard. And so you're leading during a global pandemic. You're trying to effectively manage team that's remote or furloughed. You're dealing with the ever-changing government regulations, and you've watched the events industry get decimated. And through all of that, your team's looking to you. They're still looking to you. They're looking to you to see how you manage and how you lead during change. How often have you heard the word unprecedented? Isn't that word just being used? Pivot and unprecedented. Right? We might be dealing with unprecedented times right now. I don't love that word. And the reason I don't love it is I think it tells our brain it's unprecedented, so we don't know what to do. We don't know how to respond. So it kind of gives us an excuse to kind of, check out. And I've spent a lot of time reflecting on what is it that, and I work a lot with meetings and conferences as well as event leaders, but what do event leaders need right now? And I've probably had over 150 conversations, I would say leaders, not just events, but conferences, meetings, but let's just say everything live, getting people together in group business or group, whether it's public or private events. And I've worked in the last 16 years, working with organizations a lot in the hospitality and event business around performance and change. And one thing I have found is that the leadership fundamentals still work. It may be unprecedented times, but the leadership fundamentals still work. And I want to hit on some of those today. And the number one job of a leader is to have a vision. And that vision must give hope. But how do we do that with so much uncertainty? Having a vision in the midst of uncertainty is what great leaders do, as hard as that may sound. Okay, so you may not know when this is going to end. You may not know how you're going to get through it. You may not know what it's going to look like on the other side, what's going to be the long-term impact. But we do know if. And everyone needs hope. So I had done a little research of what do people need right now? What do employees looking for from leaders? And here's some of the basic universal needs. I actually pulled out this report on this. So this is through Gallup. And they do research and they study worries and fears and confidence during every major crisis over the last 80 years. Okay, so this includes Great Depression, Pearl Harbor, and World War II, the Kennedy assassination, upheavals and riots in the 1960s, 9/11, the 2008 financial crisis, and now COVID. And what they found is that people need leaders to provide a path forward, a vision, even a vision that's short-term in the middle of the uncertainty that we're having right now, but they still need a vision. So here's the top 4 universal needs that they found employees need from leaders: trust, compassion, stability, and hope. All right, so what I'm going to cover with our time today is three main outcomes. The first is I want to share this journey through change model to give you some context, because we're going through change. And this model's relevant whether it's planned change, a lot what I do in the work I do with organizations, or unplanned change, which is we're dealing right now. So you can identify where are you in this process, in this model, and secondly, be able to identify the people, your team, even if they're furloughed, but how are you helping others? Because that's what leaders do. And you got to help yourself, but also how do you help others navigate this change journey? So that'll be the first thing. Secondly, we're going to look at the leadership fundamentals that still work. And I'm going to touch on a couple fundamentals for you. How do you lead yourself? Because all leadership starts with leading yourself. And then we're going to look at some strategies of leading others during change. And then lastly, I've woven in some questions throughout this. Because anytime you're going through challenge, there's an opportunity for growth. There's an opportunity for learning. You know, and I think one of our jobs as leaders is how do you be better on the other side of this? Going through an obstacle, going through a challenge, going through something in your life, anything. Think of something you've been through. What do you learn and grow through that experience? Because that's where learning and growth takes place. So I'm going to weave in some questions to give you an opportunity in this session today to spend some time reflecting on that and maybe have some insights. And really, before we wrap up, what's most relevant to you and your team moving forward? All right, so that's our plan for the time. So let me open up with a question right here. What have you learned about yourself during this pandemic? What is something that you've learned? This could be learned as a leader. This could be something you've learned personally. But what's something that maybe has been an insight for you or a growth opportunity for you during this time? I'd love just a couple people to share in the room. And I don't know if we need a mic for this or how to best do it. Yeah, Krista.
I mean, I've always been a generally positive person.
Yeah.
But with all the negativity around, I sort of purged all of that. I didn't really feel like that was helpful. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I was kind of just flipping that switch to being positive and tried to stay positive. So I feel like that's been a good thing because it's opened my eyes to see new ways to rethink events, rethink how to project that to our audience, rethink the whole situation, and come up with new ideas. And I think that's yesterday what John White did with the Pride Fest, which is awesome. So that's my lesson learned. I don't know if I learned anything, but I learned a lot about myself. Great.
What's one thing that helps you to stay positive? Because because we're getting bombarded with that kind of bad news, negativity. This isn't working. You know, we're falling back. It's coming back. Another spike. What have you learned, or how do you do that to be able to shift and stay positive?
Mine was because I didn't have a choice in the matter. You know what I mean? I mean, I work for a company where revenue is everything. Yeah. Not everything, but revenue is very important to the company, and we have to do what we can, or, you know, we're not doing proper business. And so it's a different perspective having worked for government previously, whereas events, if they happen, they happen. If they don't, they don't.
So but really, I have
I'm
no
under
other
a
option.
Revenue problem, I have to
be positive. I have to show up. I have to get to work.
In the matter.
What's my other option? Curl up in a ball in bed and, right?
Yeah.
And by the way, let's also have some grace. Thank you, Krista, for sharing.
Yeah.
You know, all of us, and we'll talk about this a little bit in this change journey, it's actually very normal. There are a lot of people. I joke about, there's people that are drinking. There's people that are addicted to Netflix. There's people that are, you know, they are curled up. They aren't getting up. They don't want to get out of bed. Why? Because that's called human. When you're going through the experiences, how this industry has been hit, it is very human to be frustrated, to be angry. All of that is very normal. How you're able to respond over time. Now, I'm actually going to share in a moment here just kind of my experience, kind of very similar, where I kind of went there, and then I kind of made that decision to say, wait, I got to choose how I show up because it's going to impact other people. How about somebody else? Just something that you've learned about yourself. Let's go to the back here, and then we'll come up front.
I've learned that I don't like to make alternate plans. Like, you know, I know that next year is like, okay, what are we doing for a, 10,000 person festival, 1,500 person, and 50 people?
Yeah.
And I'd rather just wait, have some amount of waiting. I don't want to create 50 pages of government documents to, I think it's just, let's wait and see. And I know that doesn't really work for the bean counters in the room, but, it's just, at some point, I'd rather spend time growing or helping the organization grow than spend time making plans that are never going to come to fruition.
Yeah, so if you learned is like, hey, a lot of this is, oh, you need a plan A, you need a plan B, a plan C. And some other folks, like yourself, is like, can we just wait out till we have some clarity? And then I'd rather have less time and crunch time and pull off what we're actually going to do versus have all these contingencies. Right, all right, let's go right here.
I think,
And say your name too, just so I get.
oh yeah, I'm Lexi. I'm
Lex-
with the Arapahoe County Event Center.
All right, Lexi.
Counties. I would say it was more of like just reaffirming what I already knew is that I love and crave structure. So the whole working from home was really difficult in
Yeah.
that I wanted to do everything but work, and I knew I had to, and trying to figure that out where I'm not in the office, I don't have my routine.
Right.
And I just kind of felt spiraled, right? We didn't really have a lot to stand on at that time. There was a lot of unknown, uncertainty.
Yes.
And I just kind of felt like I was waffling, like, where am I? What am I doing? And I don't have a direction.
Yeah.
And so structure, need the routine.
Now, have you found a way to create some structure, even working from home?
Yeah, and I think over time, right, we adapt and we adjust and pivot.
Yep.
And so, yes, but I also am fortunate in that we are doing kind of a hybrid model at work, so we're 3 days on, 2 off.
Okay.
So that's helped a lot.
Yeah, I think we all, a lot of us, thank you, Lexi. So we're all looking for some stability. We're all looking for some certainty. And when you're in this degree of uncertainty, we're trying to latch on to anything. You know, what is it that we can control? What is it that we don't have control of? And that's part of what we want to do as leaders. We have to focus our energy, our effort on what we actually can have an influence on, what we do. And we have to be able to let go of some of those things we don't. And that's not an easy thing always to do. So for me, I remember when this, when this all first kind of went down, I like a lot of us, it was like, it was crazy, you're working hard, you're plugging away, you're kind of in that hamster wheel and going so fast. It was almost like, man, just a little bit of a forced pause was not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, at the very beginning, I don't know if anybody else experienced this, at the very beginning, we had no idea what was coming, but I remember like not rushing, my kids don't have their sports, don't have all their social lives, I'm not traveling as much. We had some quality family time. I have 2 teenage daughters. We were able to have some meals together. Got some projects down around the house that I've been talking about doing. So the first couple of months was like, all right, I'm kind of getting this. But remember at the beginning, they said it was going to kind of burn off by the summer. So we're like, all right, a couple months, forced pause, little sabbatical. Yeah, it's fine. Well, then over time, I saw all my in-person, commitments for the year start to cancel. My speeches, conferences were canceling, all my trainings, facilitated work that I do, things canceled. I mean, all the way through, into fourth quarter. And I also saw the impact it was having on my kids, because we're starting to talk about school and what's it going to look like, and you're going to have to go online, and the stress and anxiety that causes for the kids. I saw the impact it was having on my wife. My wife's an event planner, by the way. Okay? So I do have an appreciation for this industry. So all of that, and I remember just getting, it was like the news that Krista was sharing. It was, every day was more bad news. I saw friends of mine, colleagues in this industry, threatens. I saw businesses go out of business, some small businesses. I saw people that were 15, 20, 25, even 30 years in this business lose their jobs. I mean, people that are in their 50s, late 50s, lose their jobs in an industry they've been in for 30 years. And I was getting frustrated and sad and mad and angry. And I remember it was early June. It was right when we were like, got that news that, guess what? This isn't going to end in the summer. And it was like early June. I go into my backyard. It was early in the morning. It was like the sun was just starting to come up. It was like 5:45. I'm barefoot in the grass praying for this thing to end. And I remember as I opened my eyes and the rays of sunshine were hitting me, and I felt this sense of peace for the first time in a long time. And in that moment, I had 2 insights. And the first is that my mission hasn't changed. My mission is still to inspire and influence positive change in individuals and organizations. That has not changed. And I would challenge you to think about, has your mission changed? How you're going to deliver it, how you need to adapt, may have changed, but the mission itself. And the second insight I had was that I had to stop focusing on myself, kind of similar to what Krista shared. I had to get away from like pity party for myself and say, wait, what am I doing to lead other people? What am I doing to be the light for other people? What am I doing to have a positive influence on other people? Because that's what leaders do. What's the other choice? The other choice? I remember a colleague of mine was talking about this. We were talking about the distinction between disappointment and being disgruntled. Okay? This is disappointing. It is frustrating. It is okay to have those emotions of what was lost and even get angry. But when we get into this kind of disgruntled place, that's impacting our future performance. That's impacting the people around us. That's impacting our team. That's impacting our decision-making moving forward. That we can't have. We can be disappointed, but we can't be disgruntled if we're going to be great leaders out there. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I want to share this model this change model. And I actually do think it'll be best for the people, Steve, online, to just, let's go full screen on this. So I think it's better for you to see this model, and then we can check back after we go through this part. So this is what we're going to talk about. And with this model, you can see that we're going to start like in this upper left, and it's stability up at the top if you look at the axis, and then you kind of go through some chaos, and you kind of come back to stability. And then on the left side, you're looking back, and then on the right side is where you're looking forward. And so we're going to talk about each one of these. And as we look at these, I want you to think about where you are in this process. Then I'm going to go back through this model, and I'm going to give you some strategies to how to identify what each step or each phase kind of looks like. And then secondly, we're going to look at it of how you lead others through it. How do you help other people? Because that's what leaders, that's what we're here to talk about. How do you help lead not just yourself, but help others navigate through this process? All right, so we go from comfort and control, fear, anger, and resistance. Can relate to that. I just shared mine. We then move into this inquiry, this experimentation, discovery. We start to search. We start to ask questions. We start to get curious. What can I do? So that's kind of a shift that starts to take place between those two. And then we finally move into this learning, acceptance, and commitment. All right, so let's talk about each one of these in the journey through change. So the first, this comfort and control. This is when I was kind of like this at the beginning, like waiting to get back to normal. I was like, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. I don't need to really change anything. I don't need to, this whole virtual thing, I don't know. It's not really going to, a couple months, I'll be fine. Just kind of bridge this thing. We'll get through this, right? You don't know what you don't know. The uncertainty starts. You may work hard on the wrong things. Then you move this fear, anger, and resistance. What's this look like? This might be a little bit bigger. I can't just keep doing what I'm doing. I'm going to have to start to change. And our natural tendency is to resist it. I work in the change business. People resist change. Yeah, go ahead. Say your name too, if you would. Steven. Yeah, go ahead, Stephen.
For me, you just went a little fast on the slides.
Yeah.
So you have looking back, looking forward,
yeah.
Stability, and what's on the bottom?
Chaos.
Chaos. Okay, got it.
I'll show this again. Yeah, I'll go through this a couple times so we can reinforce it and you'll see it a couple times.
Yeah, just with not knowing chaos, it was difficult to answer your question.
Okay, got it. Fair enough. Thank you. So this is where reaction. We get very inward focused. We're focused on this ourselves. Poor me. Pity city. Right? It's an okay place to visit, but you don't want to build a house there. That's the idea. But it's once again, it's natural. This is part of the phase. It's part of the process that you go through. This is where the performance starts to deteriorate because you're operating from a place of anger and frustration. So that's fear, anger, and resistance. And then as you move, the third phase is when you start to say, okay, you start to get curious. Look at inquiry. You start to ask questions. What can I do differently? You start to discover because you're more open. You're not just resisting the change. You're all of a sudden saying, wait, something's got to be different here. So this is more you're showing up. You're being a little more curious. You don't have all clear answers on everything. And as I shared earlier, we're always looking for some certainty. We're in uncertainty, so what can I get certain about? What is it that I can control? I can still have a vision and a plan, but it only gets me to Thanksgiving, right? It's not going to be as far out as it was before. You got to start trying new things. For me, I was like, I got a whole virtual home studio set up now, right? I got a little kind of set up. I've learned a lot about AV stuff and the stuff that you have to learn and all that goes into that to make things work effectively, and definitely have a new appreciation for that. You're learning and you're seeing what's possible. One of the questions I like to ask is, what does this make possible? And it sounds like the session yesterday, talked a little bit about, this is where innovation does take place. Under struggle, under challenge, when you're giving parameters and things, and it may be painful, but that's where innovation takes place. There's all kinds of innovation that's going to come through this time. People are going to figure out how to do things differently. How to adapt. What does this make possible? Great question to ask, personal life and professionally in your business. All right, then the next one is learning, acceptance, and commitment as we move the rest of the way around. So here, you're accepting this is the current reality. This is the way it is, but I got to still choose if I'm going to get out of bed, not out of bed. I need to go to work. I need to try to produce even revenue if it's a bridge. It might be 1/20th of what it was before, but it's something to keep the doors open. Let go of what you can't control. Often easier said than done, but have an awareness of what is it that you truly have control over and what is it that you don't have control over. That's just a life principle that all of us have heard, but you can focus on what we can't control. There's nothing that comes from that. What can I do? We can always control our response to something happens. We can't always control what happens. Work together with others. That's a big part. CFEA, that's what you're doing here. How can we come together and collaborate as an association with other members that are in the festivals and events industry? How can we support each other? How can we help each other? It's part of what we want to do. That's part of this purpose of this conference. Feel hopeful and give hope for others, as I shared earlier. Okay, so those are the 4 phases. And what I want to do, I set up a little poll here, so you can pull out your phones, and all you're going to do is text this, this number of when you think about those 4 quadrants. I'll put them back up here. I want you to think, where are you currently? And by the way, do you think you just move through this once and you're kind of done? Yeah, Ira, go ahead.
Well, that's what I was just going to ask.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I've been through this cycle multiple times. I feel like I've been through this cycle
Yes.
multiple times. I've told, and everybody's talked, that we wake up on plan A, by noon we're at plan B, and by 3 o'clock we're on plan C, we wake
Right.
up on plan A again.
Yeah.
I feel like I've gone through this cycle
Yes.
multiple times and trying to redefine. And so you ask where I am today, I can answer that question.
Right.
But it's a cycle.
No, that's a great point. I appreciate you sharing that, Ira. Yes, where are you currently? So all you're doing is texting that number. Just text A, B, C, or D, and then we'll just kind of get a poll. And this works for those of you virtually as well. So they can if you're virtual, you can do A, B, C, or D and text this number. Yeah, we can go through this, as Ira just shared. This may be once a month, once a week, or maybe even happen in the same day. What you want to do is have that awareness of where you are and that it's normal to have some of those emotional experiences as you're going through it, but to be able to identify where you are and then know what's going to help move me into that next phase that I'm naturally going to go through. This is just part of the human process that we experience when we're going through change. All right, so let's see. The next slide, I think it should work. Let's see where we are. Well, look at that. No one's in the first 2, so you guys have already moved around, or at least today, right? So we got 3/4 of you are in that place of exploration and discovery and inquiry, and then 25% have moved to the learning and acceptance and commitment pieces where you are currently. All right, so thank you for participating in that. So let's go back through this model again, and this time I want you to think about staff or your team or others that you can help as leaders to influence or to help them navigate through this process. So I'm going to share some of the strategies of what people need in each one of these phases so they can move through the process. Make sense? All right, so let's start with the comfort and control. So when you're leading others through this, acknowledge that we've had successes through the past. We've been through this. So and by the way, it's the same thing for you personally. It's not, we can say this is unprecedented. We've never been through this. And it's not that that's not a true statement. But those of you that remember 2008, or those of you who remember 9/11, or those of you that, there are other events that happen. And I always like to remind people, if you think of all the things you've been through, what percentage of them have you survived? Yeah, right? So acknowledge that there's something to build off of. We can get through obstacles. The obstacles may look different, but they're still obstacles. You still have strategies that can help you to overcome them. Share the consequences of not changing, right? There isn't an option. A lot of these, there's not an option. Yeah, this is going in this direction, whether we like it or not. We have to adapt how we're doing business right now. It's just the nature of where things are. So that's comfort and control with leading others. The next phase, with the fear, anger, and resistance, acknowledging. I was saying this earlier. We have to have some empathy for each other right now. We have to have some compassion. People are going through stuff, and it's different for each person. But everybody has their stuff. It's devastating for my 17-year-old to not have her volleyball season, and for not to have the first football game, and to miss homecoming. Okay? That's devastating for a 17-year-old. Granted, it's not life or death, but it is a big deal. Those of you that are small business owners and you're laying off your employees and you're trying to figure out how are you going to get across, can you make it through? How are you going to make this work financially? These are real emotions, real things that people are dealing with. All of us as leaders, as humans, have to have some compassion, empathy, and give some grace to ourselves and to other people during this time. So acknowledge that this is where people are. Listen, listen, listen. This is where empathy comes, when you can listen and deeper listening to where people are and acknowledge what they're going through. Tell people what you know, because I hear this a lot. I don't know what to communicate. I don't know. I don't know. There's so much uncertainty. This is what I know. This is what I don't know. And this is our plan right now. We're going to come up with a B, and C, or we're going to wait this out and we're going to make a decision on whether we're going to start planning this thing in January or we're not. That's kind of where we are. It's what I know. This could change tomorrow. You're honest. You're open. All right? The next phase, leading inquiry, experimentation, and discovery. This is where you start to get creative. You start to get innovative. Give people permission. Start finding solutions. Find different ways to do things. What are we going to do to go virtual? What are we going to do to go hybrid? How else are we going to do businesses? How are we going to separate people into pods at a festival? What are different ways of doing things? Encourage people to take some risks. We have to take some risks right now. When you're operating with uncertainty, we were talking about this. You know, if you're a leader, leadership is about, you have to make decisions during uncertainty. If we had all the facts every time you have to make a decision or decide to go on something, it's not easy. Encourage teamwork and collaboration. We're seeing this a lot right now. The whole live events coalition. We're finally seeing our industry come, I don't say finally, but if you look at it relative to other industries, I don't think we have the same collaboration at a national or even global level. And I think this is something that has brought some cohesion, you know, as far as in the events industry through the Live Events Coalition. Encourage teamwork and collaboration. Once again, this is part of being a member and part of being a part of CFEA, is to come together and learn and support each other. And encourage, you know, personal reflection and learning. This is something I want to do with you today through some of the questions that I'm asking you to help you to reflect and learn, because once again, during challenge, during uncertainty, this is where growth takes place. When we get on the other side of this, you want you and your team to be better. You want to be stronger for it. Take advantage of it, because I'm watching teams right now, and once again, I understand teams are furloughed, teams are laid off. We don't know what it's going to look like. I am seeing teams that are getting stronger, more cohesive, even people that are not working as a team, and I'm seeing teams that are cracking, and the cracks are showing, and it's getting worse, and it's pulling them apart, and they're going to be weaker on the other side of this. All right, and then the last, learning, acceptance, and commitment phase. Acknowledge their hard work. For some businesses, there's less people doing the work, and so there's actually more work for some of the people that are left in some small businesses. Celebrate successes and accomplishments no matter how small, right? It's like, oh gosh, we're used to doing this event and it's usually 10,000 people. Okay, now we got pods of 100 people. Celebrate successes. Being in person. This is in person. This is something to celebrate. To get a group of people together that are passionate about live events and do something live is pretty cool. Following safety protocol. Reaffirm the vision. Okay, you could go ahead and take it off full screen if you're still there, Steve, for the virtual folks. Comments or questions on anything around the model, navigating yourself or navigating or helping others navigate it? Okay. As I shared earlier, I've spent a lot of time reflecting on what do events industry leaders need right now, and I already shared that the leadership fundamentals still work. And it starts with that vision, and that vision must give hope. And the other term I like using during this time that I think is important for leaders is being realistic optimists. I think we have to be real. We can't ignore what's going on and the impact this has had on our industry. But being real where things are, but optimistic about where things are going. We have to have, once again, what is your other option? If there's not some hope, some vision that we're going to get on the other side of this at some point. Once again, you may not know when it's going to happen. You may not know how you're going to get through it. You may not know what it's going to look like, but you do know if. And everyone needs that hope. Here's a quote I like. This is Simon Sinek. He said, optimism helps. Optimism is different from positivity. And optimism is not naive. Sometimes people hear positivity. Oh, it's just positive thinking. That's just optimism. Optimism accepts the truth of reality. It accepts the truth of reality. This industry has been decimated. Accepting that. This is where we are currently, and looks forward to a brighter future. Optimism is the foundation of hope. Optimism is the foundation of hope, and hope keeps us moving forward. There's a light at the end of the tunnel, and we'll get there together. Once again, that together, I think we're seeing more cohesion. I've seen teams, once again, get stronger going through this. together. I shared this with a client, though, in the events industry, and she's like, you know what? I don't see a light at the end of the tunnel. There is no light. So what am I supposed to do? I'm like, well, then you get out your phone, you turn your flashlight on, you get in the tunnel, and you shine that light. And you know what? You see 5 feet in front of you, and you take a step. Then you take another step. Then you take another step. Why? Because that's what leaders do. Once again, what's your other option? You're run out of the back stock of alcohol already. Okay? Okay, so let's talk about leading yourself. All leadership starts with leading yourself. So I want to share 2 principles on leading yourself, and then I'm going to share 3 principles on leading others. And these are the leadership fundamentals that still work. Okay? So, number 1. We've touched on this a little bit, but it's manage how you show up, because it influences those people around you. Just as Krista was sharing about positivity, it's like a choice. It's like the same experience I had in my backyard. It was like, there's frustration, there's bad news, it's more, you're getting bombarded with all this, social media, news coming out, government regulations. It can wear on you. But then at some point, you make a decision. And I made that decision and said, wait, I got to get out there. What am I doing to support? This is my industry too. I love this industry. So how am I going to help people? It's the same thing for all of us as leaders. So actually just stand up for a second if you would. Even those of you online, you can stand up too, virtually. Just stand up, because one of the biggest things that impacts our energy and how we show up is our physiology. I just want you to just stand in a resourceful place, that you're ready to take on some things, right? You're ready to take on some challenge and some problems. Yeah, you can stretch a little bit, that's fine. Maybe shoulders back, a little bit of a smile on the face. Just take 3 deep breaths. Sometimes we just breathe into our chest. I'm talking about belly breaths. And when you blow out, you think you're done. You're not. There's more air in there. Clear out those lungs. Once again. One more deep breath. But shoulders back, smiling. Our physiology can impact how we show up. More than even what we say, the influence we're having on people is who we're being. Who you're being. You go ahead and take a seat. But think about just how you show up. If you're not feeling it sometimes, like I got to shake some butt, it literally maybe get up away from the screen, walk around, move around, get some energy, take some deep breaths. Just your physiology, because how you're showing up is influencing the people around you. There's a little bit of fake it till you make it here. There's a little bit of like, you know what? Once again, what's the alternative? What I'm challenging you with is if you're in a leadership role and you have an opportunity, it's not just you. You got to lead yourself how you show up. It's ultimately going to influence the people around you. But it starts with you. And if you can't lead yourself, you're sure in heck not going to lead and influence other people. Okay? All right, so the second concept, so that's one principle. The second one with leading yourself is identify, I use the term success habits. These are your strategies that help set you up for success. These may be things like, do you have some type of morning routine? A lot of people, are given attention around their wellness during this time. They're realizing the impact this has had, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual wellness. What are some of the things that you do when you're at your best? I actually do a whole program just on that principle. And I help people identify, because what I've learned is those things are identifiable and duplicatable. Once you know what those strategies are, they don't happen by chance. Those best days don't happen by chance. There are things that it's not only do, by the way, it's things that you think, say, and do differently that help set that up to be at your best. I want you to start to reflect on what are those things for you. What are your success habits when you're at your best? They're identifiable and duplicatable. Your way's the right way. So it's unique to each of us. So I'm not here to tell you this is what you have to go do. It's more of like, wow, it does impact me when I do those things. Or I wake up at that time. Or I have this for breakfast. Or I focus on this in the morning. Or I get some exercise. Or whatever it is. Think about what those are. It's unique to each of us, and little things can make a big difference. Sometimes we underestimate. I've seen people, you ever just waking up 15 minutes earlier can change the day? Versus like, I got to rush to this and I got to rush to this. Sometimes it's just a small thing can make a big difference. So as we brainstorm on some of these, I want you to capture some of these for you. And I'm going to give you a couple minutes to reflect on what are your success habits. And I don't know if we have anybody virtually. This is an opportunity too to use the chat feature where you can share as well, and Krista's seeing if there's any chat that comes in. But what are some of those things? And I'm going to give you a bunch of prompts right here to get you to reflect on this, because this is important. These are things that help you to be at your best, regardless of what's happening externally. What are those success habits for you? So here's some questions just to prompt you on your best days. And if anything comes up, capture a couple of these things for yourself. What time do you go to bed? Sounds like such a simple concept. Your day starts the night before is one thing that I've learned. Whatever you do to wind down, what time you go to bed impacts the next day. What time do you get up? Does that impact you? And then what's that morning routine? What's the morning routine that you fall into? That, not I want to say fall into, that you choose when you're at your best. For some people, it's some type of exercise. It could be time with a family member. If you're a parent, it could be something with kids. Is there something about reading? Some people, it's some type of spiritual connection time or prayer, meditation, yoga, once again, reading something, but some type of, maybe a dog walk, watching the sunrise, whatever it is. But what are those things that really, that set you up for success? And has it changed working from home? We were talking about, it's a lot of hybrid now, where people are totally working from home. Some people, have you done something to set up your space at home? Because it may be that, hey, this is lasting longer. I'm just kind of trying to make this work in the hallway. This isn't the best way to do it, or the basement. I actually need to set this up in a way that I can be more successful in my work. How do you plan your day? How do you schedule your appointments? When do you schedule your appointments? When do you start your day? When do you end your day? All of these things, and I get it. Some people are like, well, hey, my day is just the next fire comes in. I'm going to challenge you if that's what you believe. We control our schedules more than we realize. We like to say that, no, everyone else is controlling. That's not true. There are things that you can put parameters on how you manage your life and how you manage your schedule and how you manage your personal responsibilities. We all have to do it. What do you do to feel positive and confident? What helps you to tap into motivation or to feel positive? Maybe it is something you need to read. Maybe, do you have that friend that you call and they always kind of pep you up a little bit? Think about that as well. We talked about the physical environment. What actions do you take to gain momentum? Some people, it's like, you ever do that where you write something down just to cross it out? Like, I just want to knock some things out because I get momentum. Like, hey, if that works for you and gets you momentum, great. Other people, it's the Brian Tracy concept. Eat the frog first. Do the biggest thing for the day, and you get momentum. Just think about what that is for you. And it's not just things you do. It's also what you focus on and believe. It's also what you believe. And this is something, beliefs aren't necessarily true. Beliefs are not necessarily true. I can believe I'm an incredible father. I can believe I'm a lousy father. Neither is true all the time. But what belief's more empowering? What do you believe about yourself? What do you believe about this industry? What do you believe about your company? What do you believe about your own resourcefulness, creativity, innovation? What you believe impacts you, and definitely impacts your team around you too, but it impacts you. If you believe you're resourceful and you're going to get through anything that comes your way, that's a belief. Empowering beliefs. It's also, what do you say to yourself? Anybody else talk to themselves? Right? We all have self-talk. The question is, do you have what's the empowering self-talk that moves you forward? So think about what some of your success habits are. Let's go ahead and I'd love a couple people to share. What do you know, something that you think, say, and do when you're at your best or on your best days that would be your success habits? Let's just have a couple people share.
My success habits are making lists and actually following them. So
Right.
making a list of everything I need to do. What do I need at the store? What do we have coming up? And making sure that I'm checking in on that list throughout the day.
So you
both
got your
work-
thoughts, they're out of your head, they're on paper, I have a
Yeah.
list, and all I need to do is follow my list,
Yeah.
and all is right with the world, right?
Yes.
Right? And by the way, people are different, right? Some people are like, everything has a place for everything, and that's great. Other people are like, hey, I got my stacks and it works for me. So it's what works for you, once again. Somebody else, what's a success habit that helps you lead yourself and be at your best? Let me go back here and then we'll come
Yep, Stephen, I mean, we have a lot of specific habits, so bed by 11, up by 7 is the goal.
Yep.
We have, I can basically get out of bed, go downstairs and drink a cup of hot lemon water, and have some vitamins.
Yep.
And then try to do stretching, then exercise. So it's like a set of things to get my day going.
Yep.
And then prepare my breakfast, prepare my lunch, so I have some clear and good food. So I have a lot of those kinds of habits.
Yep. And do you see a difference, Stephen, when you do those things versus don't do those things, or something interrupts that? Does it impact that? Do you see an impact?
Yeah, I mean, well, it's two things. One is if I get my day started right with like the lemon water, whatnot, I tend to eat better and feel better overall. And then Second, I'm definitely a creature of habit. So if I
Yeah.
do something out of order, then I invariably forget something.
Yeah.
The amount of times I go back to my house to pick up something is greater than the number of times
Yep.
I don't.
Yep.
And if the better that I can keep in that habitual mode, the better off I am.
Right. And that's what's great about habits in general, right? By definition, it's repetition, and then you naturally get pulled towards them. If they're empowering habits, we also have negative habits, right? But we're talking about what are those empowering habits that we'll miss if we don't do them.
Yeah, my wife and I read The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg
Yes.
last year.
Yeah.
And gigantic change in, habit forming and recognizing habits, both the good and bad, and where they come from and how to start and end.
Yeah, The Power of Habit's a great book, and it also talks about how do you incorporate habits, how do you create the reinforcement so it works in your brain and locks it in. So there's some
Absolutely.
great strategies in that book, so thank you for sharing that. Somebody else, let's go over here to, I think it's Mike, right?
So all of this is causing me a great deal of anxiety because I'm going to need therapy after this because I feel like I'm a mess with all this. But the thing that I'm struggling with is that, so defining success and the habits that work around it, it's what are you successful at? Because the things that make me successful, which we have been getting things to be people working and being a leader, are not the same things that are successful for our personal life. And it's not, so I can, when I'm like, oh, well, this makes me really successful, and I'm trying to keep people working, and I'm trying to keep things going, it's not successful for everything else. Those things are in conflict all the time. So that's been with a couple of your things that you've put up here, is that I'm like, well, for this, to be a good leader, to do this, to make things happen, I need to do these things. But, to, have some sort of mental health, success is totally different. So I guess, I don't know if I could answer either one, but that's more my comment, is that it's hard to determine, it depends on what your goal is. To see
Yeah,
if you're
I think
successful.
with this question, it's what are those things you think, say, and do that help you to be at your best, regardless of external circumstances? But what it's going to do is make you more resourceful. It's going to make you more confident. It's going to make you more effective at dealing with whatever life brings us. Because we may go A, B, C, D in the same day, right? So this is more of just what is it that you can control that are things that have been shared already of what you can do that help you. And some of this may be mental. What helps me with the mental part of like, I got to deal with this, and I got to deal with the challenge of this day and with the reality of what we're dealing with in our industry right now.
Sure. So the example being is that,
Yeah.
like Kinsley said, I think that making lists is something
Yeah.
that has really helped
Yeah.
me be successful in structuring things. The thing that's made me really successful at getting through this pandemic with work stuff is not saying no and answering my phone all the time and being fully available to every opportunity that comes along.
Yeah.
Because that's what it takes
Yeah.
to keep people working. But
Yeah.
there's an opposite consequence to that. So that's where I struggle how to sort of live in this purgatory of determining what is success, because you're giving something up to try to
It's
get
almost,
through this time.
I almost hear, Mike, that you're talking, let's talk about your success habits. You're kind of talking about, okay, when I look at work and I look professionally and the impact on other people, it's almost like the yin and yang of, I have to redefine what success is in a way.
Yeah.
Like it's not what it was before.
Yeah.
And the same stuff before isn't necessarily working now with some of what you're saying.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm basically saying that there's two ends of this, and you've talked about all of it, and the deep breath and doing this and getting through it,
Yep.
and being a good leader to the people around
Right,
you, them
right.
seeing
Yes.
that you're doing everything that you can
Right.
to make this all work out for them.
Right.
And the determining what are good habits for success, to the two goals, they're in conflict. Because for personal health, it would be, we need to take a breath, we need to figure out what we're going to do, get a little bit structured, and to be a good leader and show that you care about people, it's like, I'm going to sacrifice
Yeah.
everything for me
Yeah.
to make this work.
I understand your distinction of you're saying, hey, if I'm just focused on leading myself and taking care of me and my own wellness, that conflicts with some of the things it takes to be a great leader for others. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not saying there's not truth, that there's not sacrifice. It's like parenting, right? There's going to be things that you have to give up for the overall good and success of the family. And from a work standpoint, I would challenge it a little bit that it's totally, I have to choose one or the other. Because a better you does make you better. Put on your oxygen mask first concept, right? So what are those things? You may have to limit it. You may have to minimize. You may still have to say, it's only a certain amount of time, and then I have to be available, or I have to answer the phone. But I would challenge you to look at that and say, what is it that I need to be at my best to be a good leader, how I'm showing up, and what do I need to sacrifice to a certain extent to help my team? Does that resonate at all?
It does a little
Yeah,
bit.
yeah.
Again, it's that kind of conflict exists because one of those things is, you know,
Yeah.
Keeping a person working versus, I mean, we're a service industry, right? So we're in the event.
right.
So the world's on fire, right? So
Right.
I get a phone call and they say, hey, we need operations centers. And I'm like, I'm going to take this job. It's going to keep people working.
Right, right.
So, and then they call again and again and again. And I'm saying, well, I'm keeping other companies working and people
Right,
doing this.
right.
That's important. That's
Yes.
important stuff. But
Right.
it also reaches an end where it's like, I can't live within any sort of structure that I used to live within to be successful. And I was good at that. I'm a structured person. So this whole pandemic has got like just wrapping your head around all these good habits and structure is like, yeah, I'm really struggling with it. So.
No, thank you for sharing. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, I think that's the truth, right? Can't we all relate to what was just shared? For sure, thank you. So here's another question to reflect on, because this is a similar concept. When we start to move this from, this is the last question we'll ask about leading yourself, and then we'll move into leading others. But what's your greatest moment of overcoming adversity in your life? And the key here is, how did you do it? Think about something you've overcome. This is, once again, while this is unprecedented, adversity is not unprecedented, challenge is not unprecedented, problems are not, even crisis. So think about what you have done in the past. What's the biggest adversity you have faced? This can be personally or professional. And reflect into, how did you do it? What were your strategies that worked for you? Think about what those are. I went through a major health issue in 2014, 2015. I had to have a major surgery. And I remember through all of that, part of what I had to do is I needed to make a plan. Maybe back to the to-do list, I had to have a plan. I had to accept help from others. That was one that I learned, that I was like, yeah, maybe more than I naturally would do, accepting help, and I need to be able to give myself some grace and some patience, which was not my strong suit. But that's an example of what I learned going through some adversity. So when I think about what it is for you, and what are some of those things that have helped you, because it's the adversity may change, but your resourcefulness internally isn't different. It's you tapping into that resourcefulness of saying, how do I manage through this, even in uncertainty, even when I don't know. Anybody want to share? Anybody have an example? Yeah, go ahead, Krista.
I'll go ahead and tie the last question with this question because they kind of work together
Sure.
a little bit. One of the things that I do, and I was thinking about some of your comments on the other side of the room, what I've been doing lately to try to get through all of this, because it is such a roller coaster, I keep thinking about my kids, my boys. I have a 13-year-old boy who's going through a whole lot. And while we think that our day-to-day is rough and we have all of these challenges as parents, as professionals, as leaders, I think about my 13-year-old boy who's going through some stuff. I mean, he's got physical changes going on, the puberty thing, but then he's having to deal with social media, and then you slap a pandemic right on top of him, and he's just overwhelmed. And whenever I think about my life and where I'm at in my professional career and being a mom and being everything to everybody, which I feel like I am that every day, I think about my 13-year-old and how he's just trying to figure out how to be him. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I have been practicing a lot of empathy with my children,
Yeah.
and that's translated into my professional life. And I've noticed it pretty dramatically, actually, because I can sit and just listen to my son tell me about Snapchat and the bullshit he has to deal with. While it may seem insignificant, just that act of listening to my kid makes
There you go.
such a massive difference in me personally, because then I can go to work and I'm doing that same, I'm creating that habit with my kid, and it's translating into my professional life too. So I don't know if that helps, but that's helped me get through a lot of really, really tough times. It's just thinking about, like, right now, Grand Lake is on fire. The town is on fire. We just lost the Grand Lake Lodge. That's a major deal in our industry. And in our region, one of my markets, those people are losing their homes. So to kind of go at this whole thing with empathy, I think it helps me too, you know? I don't know.
Part of what you're doing, thank you for sharing, it is putting things in perspective is one thing you're doing. And the other thing you're doing is you're looking at other people. And that's a perfect transition to leading others. And I want to share 3 principles here. And these are fundamentals, things that you've heard before, but they're needed now more than ever. They're needed now more than ever. And one is listening with empathy. It's a deeper listening, whether it's your son or whether it's your employee or your furloughed team member, whatever it is, but that deeper listening with empathy. And and once again, we're all going through this experience differently. Whether you're a 14-year-old, with school and dealing with social media and all the headaches and puberty, or whether you're dealing with a job and furloughed, or whether you're dealing with, trying to make ends meet and how do you manage people with projects and do things differently. So it does take a level of empathy. Once again, it's an opportunity for teams to strengthen. I actually have a client in Chicago that I work with, and I was working with them around their culture because they were dealing with gossip, not getting along, not working together effectively. They went totally remote during this whole thing. Their team has gotten stronger. It actually addressed some of the issues. And one of the things was they put things in perspective. The BS, they got rid of the BS. They said, we're stopping the BS because we have to pull together as a team and get through this. They also started these brain breaks, and they would do their Zoom calls, and 15 minutes a day they would jump on, and each person would take a different turn, a little team building kind of activity. But they found ways to actually connect during this time. So listening with empathy is a foundational piece. The second one is to communicate with consistency. And this, by the way, is nothing different than I've always heard. The number one complaint I hear from employees of what they want from their leaders is they don't communicate enough, right? And so right now it's even more. And the challenge for leaders I don't know what to communicate because I don't know. There's so much uncertainty. But still looking for communicate. There's never enough communication with a team. And then the third is to grow with questions. A little bit of what I'm doing with you, once again, there's opportunities to help people, not only yourself, but help your team grow and be stronger on the other side of this. So what are you doing to help them? What are you learning? How are they growing so you are going to be strong on the other side? I know it's pain, but when you're in it, that's how you build a muscle. That's how you get stronger, is through that. I work with, many of you know Visit Denver is here, the Convention and Visitor Bureau in Denver, and they're a client of mine that I've worked with over many years. And some of you may know Rachel Benedict, who's the Senior Vice President of Sales and Marketing. But she's a great example of this during this time, and I've kept in touch with her during this time, and she's been sending out daily emails to staff and furloughed people. Over the last 7 months, every day she sends an email. Talk about consistent communication. The empathy in what she talks about in them is very compassionate. It's very real. It's very transparent. It's very vulnerable. But vulnerability as leaders right now and being real, like when Mike was just sharing, yeah, it's okay to talk to your team like that because that actually increases and strengthens trust on teams. And then she weaves in, she either listens to a podcast or a book or whatever it is, but she asks some questions. And then every email at the end it says, keep looking for the silver linings. I see you even though I can't see you, and I appreciate you. Keep making the magic happen. And that's how she ends each one. I'm not saying you have to do that, but the idea of having consistent communication, the idea of truly listening and connecting with your team and strengthening and listening with empathy, and to find ways to help people grow during challenge. There's a huge opportunity for that right now. So here's one more question. And this kind of ties into a little bit where you guys started thinking already, but what is working? What have you found is the best strategy when it comes to leading others? We talked about leading yourself, but what is it that you're doing that's working? I shared an example with Rachel at Visit Denver, but those of you, and you're in a leadership role, what have you found that actually works? What's something that is working? Let me just open it up again for a share or two.
I think all you can do is just be honest, with people.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the most effective thing. I think you can just be honest with people because I don't think we have the answers. And if they see that you're struggling to be like, this is the real situation and this is what I'm dealing with, I mean, that's all I can do with my team because, I don't want to feed them full of BS about that we know what 2021 is going to be because I don't.
Would you, when you think about yourself, would you rather have bad news than no news? Would you rather have the truth than something that's, so I love that. I mean, it's such a simple concept. Be honest, be transparent, but it does make a difference on teams. Because I will tell you, there are companies out there that are not, leaders that are shut down. They're not communicating. And there's others that are communicating like crazy. And the best they can, they're being honest and transparent. But that's a strategy that works. Thank you for sharing. Somebody else? Yeah.
Other strategy is don't be afraid to be vulnerable too. I had to learn that the hard way because I don't want to fail and I don't want to appear as though.
Can you use the mic because for people who are online, they can't hear you without the microphone.
I know, and I'm the tech girl. I should know.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
I was just saying that is don't be afraid to be vulnerable.
Yes.
And to look vulnerable, not look vulnerable, but
Oh.
show people that you are human.
This is that one of the gifts. Thank you for sharing. I think that's one of the gifts in this. Isn't there more humanity going on right now where you can actually say, wait a second, showing some vulnerability, being open, it's kind of rid of the BS. I think there's a deeper, and seeing people's personal lives more with some of the remote stuff and what people are really going through, that's actually leading to deeper human connection, which, by the way, isn't festivals and events about bringing people together to connect? This is the gift, one of the gifts I do think is going to come on the other side of this. It's providing that opportunity for deeper connection, but as leaders in your team, you truly have the opportunity. And being vulnerable is a great trait of a leader. It's the number one way you build trust because you're willing to go first. You're willing to show some weakness. And of all times, there is weakness going on right now. All right, thank you for sharing that. Great. Okay, so here's what we talked about today. We talked about the change journey. We looked at your journey through change and how you can help others where you are. We also looked at how you can help other people navigate through that. We talked about the leadership fundamentals that still work, and that starts with having a vision that gives hope. As hard as it is, it may be the tunnel with the light that you're only seeing 5 feet. We talked about leading yourself. You do that by managing how you show up and by knowing your success habits, and we talked about leading others. And that was listening with empathy, communicating with consistency, and grow with questions. So, and then obviously we've had lots of questions. And the last question I'll leave you with to reflect on is, what's most relevant on what you heard today in this session that's most relevant to what you need or your team needs right now? And what's your biggest takeaway that's going to have an impact for you, your business, or your team? Maybe we'll just get real quick, just a couple people could share this. Either what's most relevant, we could throw out another question here if you have one, or biggest takeaway. It's all right. Yeah, we'll do one here.
I think just to ask more questions, right? Like, how do we get to that vulnerability state? How do we have real conversations
Yeah.
when maybe some of us are still in denial of how we're feeling about all this? And trying to stay positive and accepting that it is okay to feel like heavy days or
Yes.
you don't know and there isn't always an answer and that's okay.
Yeah.
So just
It
getting
does
to-
take a little bit of grace and knowing that you may be in that model and you may fall back and you may come forward. But I like what you said. When you think about when you don't have the answers, what about asking some questions? What about asking some questions and listening? There's a simple way to be a great leader. Anybody else? Okay, let's go to Ira in the back and then we'll. Sorry, were you going to share as well? Okay.
I think mine was the consistent communication. I've been trying to provide communication and be present when I am, but when there aren't new answers, I think I've failed to provide communication and left blank space where people may have been looking for at least a voice. Even
And
if
don't they
wasn't
do
the
it?
answer.
Don't they fill in the blanks if you don't communicate?
Yes.
And so I have to communicate, guess what? I have nothing else new. This hasn't changed. It's the same. Or this has changed. Or I'm going to find out on Tuesday or whatever it is. But communicating even when you don't have something new, that's a great insight. Great. Yeah, go ahead. We'll do one more.
I think I'm biggest takeaway is getting more consistent on my personal schedule. I've allowed that to be very all over the place. Like some days not getting out of bed till 1 or, and usually I was on my computer, but like no, not getting dressed, not getting up and doing breakfast, realizing it's gotten late. If the kids aren't around, it's like being back in college almost. And that's probably not the most successful way to do it. So maybe getting a little more consistency at home to help with the next step and be ready for when we are back, because that might be quite a shock if I continue that process.
So it's, give yourself a little bit of grace, but at the same time, know what some of those success habits are. So that's good. All right, I want to end on this great philosopher, Rocky Balboa. Right? We can learn a lot from him, but one of the things he said, you can already hear his voice, right? You, me, nobody can hit a hard as life. But it ain't about how hard you hit, it's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. Right? That's how winning is done. You know, I think people crave, and people are craving, face-to-face. There is a pent-up demand. And I actually believe the events industry is uniquely positioned because you already have these skills. Flexibility, adaptability, responding to change, thinking ahead, you know, solving what problems and figuring things out. These are skills you've been honing for years. Your workforce is grounded in these skills. If there's anybody that can survive a challenge, a new way of doing things, new problems coming your way, it's this industry. And I know Ira and I were talking about, you know, the festivals and events industry, you know, that you plan over the next year. This is part of the healing process. As festivals and events come back, it's part of the healing process for our communities. It's a big responsibility. But this industry is going to be a huge part of the comeback story. The festivals and events you plan in the next year, we may not know the exact time frame, but it's going to be about people, after this pandemic, people coming together in person, maybe it looks a little bit different, together to celebrate. And you provide that. So thanks for having me. Enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you. Thanks to all of you who joined virtually as well.